Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm here today with Paul Niederer. Paul is one of the world's leading authorities in equity-based crowdfunding investments and raising through collaborative funding solutions. He's personally been involved in over $75 million worth of transactions with 90 different companies seeking capital. Internationally, he's known as Mr. Governance because of his fraud-free reign while he was CEO of ASOB, which is the oldest equity crowdfunding platform. So, Paul, have I got that about right? And
that was pretty
explain to us how you got into crowdfunding.
Yeah, well, I was running a company on the Australian Stock Exchange, which was a dental laboratory company, just before the financial crash in 2008. And a mate of mine was running ASOB, and he rang me and he said, look, he said, this financial crisis isn't good. He said, from turning over $400,000 a month, we've dropped back to 80,000. He said, we've got like 23 staff and we really need to chop it down to 5, and 3 of those staff were lawyers. And so he said, could you come in and get rid of them and then get the platform so it actually runs so we don't lose any money on it, or at least a break-even basis. So that was my introduction to it. And I was only going to stay there a few months, but I got passionately involved in the early stage funding place for small businesses. It was just, it was really, really exciting. And back then we didn't know what we were doing was really crowdfunding, because it basically was just people funding their businesses via the internet and using the internet to present them. And so as we got further along and we spoke to Americans, they said, oh gosh, you're doing crowdfunding. And so I said, okay. And then you have to come and see the SEC, and you'll have to come and see the Toronto authorities, and the other people, and explain to them about how 300 raises have gone through your platform for around 150 million, and they're and no cases of fraud. So that's where I sort of got the reputation of Mr. Governance, because I spoke at seminars and conferences and visited all of the authorities and things like that.
Okay, that's quite interesting that it was sort of almost by chance, but that it was like finding a bit of passion there.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we actually just go into the actual crowdfunding campaigns themselves, or the raises, how long would you suggest a person actually plans before they put up a campaign on a crowdfunding platform?
And we're talking equity.
Yeah, I think because you have expertise in equity, although I mean I do know you have quite a lot of understanding around rewards as well. But other people we are interviewing are only rewards based. So possibly let's talk about equity crowdfunding.
Yes, well, both of them need a few weeks. Slava Rubin from Indiegogo said, if you don't know where 40% of your money is going to come from, don't put it on our platform. And but the thing is with equity, first of all, you've got to have some type of legal offering document. Now that's, even if you use a template, that's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks by the time you get the directors to sign off on it. You've got to really structure the campaign and get people interested in it, and get a few advocates and influencers out there talking about it, connections to journalists, that sort of thing. So, it takes probably a good 6 weeks. You'll need maybe 90 days. From 60 to 90 days before you actually go live, you need to have been working on both material like videos, summaries, mail-outs, emails, the offer document, until it goes live. And by then you should have a good number of people that are passionate about actually investing in your opportunity. Okay,
yes. And in terms of the amount that you're looking to raise, how is the best way to decide on that? Is it so that it's not too high or not too low?
Well, it's interesting. Back in 2008 or 2007, 2006, the raises people wanted were around 2 or 3 million. But that's changed. You've probably heard of the lean startup movement.
Yeah.
Whereby you just go to the next milestone and the next milestone. So in looking at that, often the milestones are around about 400 or 500,000, maybe 600,000. So what people do is they raise enough funds to get to the next milestone, and that's good for the founders, because if you actually get somebody to put 3 million in, you've probably got to give a lot more out away of your company long before it's probably ready for that. So at least when you get to the next milestone, and say you put 400,000 into marketing and now you have got customers and the business is growing, it means when you get to the next milestone and look for more investment, then at least you can increase the value of the company before you invite any more investors in. So my guess is, in a lot of companies, look for that region from like 200,000 to about 600,000 for each raise.
Okay, yeah. So you're saying rather actually raise just enough, and you can raise again, but when you've actually increased the value of your company, because then you're giving away less equity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other part of it is, you know, raising 1.5 or 2 million in a campaign it's a big stretch. And so at least you'll see with some of them that they might raise 400,000 and then they oversubscribe, or they raise a bit more by doing it. And you know, if the target seems too big and it starts off too slowly, you lose that momentum. People don't jump on board as easily.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've mentioned some aspects of a campaign that people should follow. For example, you know, really good videos and having 40% of your sort of people locked down right at the beginning. But what would you say are some of those really important aspects that make campaigns a success? Because you've got successful campaigns and then you've got major failures, sort of.
Exactly.
What are those guys doing that, you know, that are the real successes?
Yeah, well, you know, after 300 raisings, you get a good idea of what works and what doesn't. And so what I always used to do, and what I still do visually in my head, I have 3 circles: story, team, and the last one I've renamed, but that's now called empathy/traction. Okay. So if you think of it now, if it's an opportunity that you're trying to get money for, it's got to have a convincing, compelling, and credible story. So that means that if you tell it to somebody and they say, wow, that's great, I'd like to be part of that, you'll have to let me know. Then you know you've got something that at least people think's cool and that, you know, maybe they would contribute to. But then the next step is the capability aspect, that they have to believe that your team is going to be able to deliver what the story is. So you're going to say you've got to have a balanced team, like you've got to have the Steve Jobs and the Steve Wozniak. They've got to be credible people, that they believe that they can do it and they've got the qualities to do it. So therefore you've got the story and the team. And that's, you know, you'd think that should be enough. But this is all about the followers. You've got to have the empathy from a group of people that think what you're doing is cool. Like if you think of the Flowhive one on Indiegogo that raised 12 million and they only wanted 100,000. They had a whole community of people worldwide that are disappointed about the fact that the bee population is declining. And if they could have a beehive in their backyard, they think, wow, that's so cool. So you've got a story where you've got the honey thing, turn on the tap, honey comes out. Wow, what a great story. You've got the team, they've been beehive guys for a while, they've got good credentials in the industry. Then you've got a whole lot of people that are passionate about the bee population. You get 10 out of 10 in each of those 3 circles and you're away. So for me, it's about that, having a great story, a great team, and then having people that are empathetic to the point that they actually will invest and give you the traction.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's really great. That's an awesome model, and something that's quite simple for people to follow, yet really powerful.
Exactly.
And so the opposite of that would be, what are some of the mistakes that people make with campaigns? Obviously, a lack of planning and people who believe that you can put something on the internet and it'll just make money is possibly the biggest mistake. But what would you say are the biggest mistakes that people make?
I would say it's pretty much what you were saying there, that there's this fundamental belief that once you put it up there, people are going to flock to whatever you've got. But what you have to do is you actually have to attract people to your page. And the only way you do that is by communicating with people, having people out there that are ambassadors for your campaign, that are influencers, that automatically direct people towards what you're doing. And that requires a lot of planning. And so it's just to get away from that belief that this thing's going to happen because Indiegogo or because Crowdcube or because Venture Crowd or any of these platforms around the world are great, that people on there are automatically going to flock to what I've got. And it just simply doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Organic traffic to those sites, whilst there is organic traffic, if you're not on the front page, it's not like people will be able to find you anyway. And you're probably only going to get onto the front page if you are already 30 or 40% funded. So it really does require that planning in order to do that.
Exactly. I wish a lot of people realize what you've said now, because it's so valuable. Yes.
So if of course, we're the African Crowdfunding Association, and crowdfunding in Africa is in more of its infancy stage compared to a lot of the rest of the world. So, I know you're Australian, but I know you have been out to South Africa, so some of the questions now, it would be interesting if you could give an opinion on Africa. I mean, I understand that you may not be an expert on the African sort of economy, but in terms of the role that crowdfunding plays in the startup ecosystem, we're seeing that it's got quite an important role around the world. I don't know if you agree with that, but how do you see that role, and particularly in Africa?
Well, the problem with this area is that, well, first of all, crowdfunding is really internet finance. It's a way in which you can invest in something by using the internet. And if you think back to airline tickets, when you used to have to go to a travel agent and it was complicated and all sorts of things like that, to the point where you can actually go on and buy a travel ticket yourself with a card. And that means that even right down to small trips, it used to be just big trips and things like that. So what's happened is that the internet has got the ability to handle these transactions. So therefore, in the future, more and more businesses will rely on that aggregation of money and things through the internet. So I think a lot of even regulators get hung up on the idea that this is something different. It is really just the mechanization of transactions through the internet, which has happened in many, many industries. So then if you look at something like crowdfunding in Africa, and you think where some things that haven't got that regulatory barrier that regulators are passionate about putting up there, take Kiva, for example. Kiva has enabled lots of small businesses to have a loan to get going, and it's not regulated all that highly, so it means it's being able to flourish and grow. And I think it's the same with crowdfunding. It doesn't mean that you don't regulate it, it's mean that you regulate it in the area that these transactions are great to happen. It's great to have people support small businesses and make sure that the regulatory structure supports them without having to have huge people having huge big licenses and beautiful offices and things like that in order to, you could say, legitimize the transaction. So I think in a country like Africa, where there's going to be lots of people that move from having a job to having a small business, if you've got the ability to enable them to reach out and have investors in their company by having a good quality business form that allows people to come into it, and having appropriate warnings when people seek the capital, they let people know it is a high risk thing, you are investing in a business it's uncertain of returns. But basically, in every country around the world, there's lots of those businesses at the moment that's starving of capital because there isn't an easy way for mates and people 1 and 2 and 3 degrees out from that people to invest in that company. So I think there's a huge potential. And I think that's been shown by Kiva, and also the ability to send money by mobile phones and things that you've got in Africa that's leading the world, some of those things, because of the fact you haven't had like 50 or 60 or 70 years of regulations put in the middle of this that are really for big listed companies, when those small companies can do with something that really protects the people, but they have to realize that they're taking risks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's so true. And in terms of the consumer's understanding of crowdfunding, I mean, people on the ground, especially in Africa, a lot of people just don't even know it exists. How do we inform the consumer, and how important is that?
Well, the best way to inform them is through successful raises, because especially with the reward crowdfunding, that's what people mostly realize what reward crowdfunding is, what crowdfunding is. So I don't think you could ever, sort of educate people about equity crowdfunding. I think that's going to be difficult. But if they know about reward crowdfunding, and they know about a particular raise, and they hear about somebody that, maybe got jailed somewhere wrongly and now they need money to come home, or they've had a medical emergency, all those things create the fabric of people being involved and contributing. So I think the word crowdfunding they will understand after a while, and they'll generally understand the mechanics about it. And so when it comes to equity, they'll realize, so instead of getting a reward or a gift, I actually get shares in your company. So I think if they understand the first part, the second part won't be all that difficult to explain.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And in terms of crowdfunding, what do you see as the most challenging aspect in it growing in Africa?
I think it's, having legitimate business entities, which is important, that people, when they invest in something, they actually get a share certificate or recognition that they're on the share registry, and that company is a properly legal entity. And then also that if people put money in there, they do have the appropriate warnings that this is risky, but they do know at the end of the day that the money that they've put in there on the conditions they put in there actually gives them a share of an entity. And I think that's that legitimization and trust, the authorities can do a lot towards, because they can provide the templates for offer documents. I think in New Zealand system, they've got a templated offer document people can use. And then the regulations can say that if it's up to so much, as long as you've signed the warnings and you've done this and this and this, then you can legitimately invest in that particular company. And I think so those things are together, understanding that it's about businesses that are probably going to raise in say US dollars things, probably under about $300,000 or $400,000. So it's not something that is going to be a scam that's going to rip off thousands and thousands of people. And you could put ceilings on things and whatever, but basically to cut the cloth for the ecosystem that you're actually got the regulations for.
Okay, yes, no, absolutely. What we are starting to see is there are some rewards campaigns that are not being able to deliver on the products that people bought.
Yes.
And this could be putting crowdfunding in a negative light, especially in Africa, where it is fairly new. And so regulators on the equity side see these things and see them as issues and problems. What do you think is the solution there for us?
Well, most of those reward ones are under the Sale of Goods Act or the Trades Practices Act. I don't know what you call it over there. But what it means is that if I sell you something in advance and then I don't deliver it, then I break the law by not delivering something I've promised or you've agreed to buy. And so that's a different aspect of law. And what you can see, it doesn't relate back to an individual entity. Often it's just a person that's doing that. And that makes it even more difficult, because with an entity, there are directors that are responsible by law for the operations of that particular entity. And there are often heavy fines and things like that. So I think equity is okay there, but of course the normal citizen won't understand that. But I think that platforms like Kickstarter have said things like you must have a prototype first of all. And or something like that. So there are things you can make more certain that that person is going to deliver them. If you take something like Alibaba, they actually hold the money until the goods are there and then they pay. You know, they've decided a really fairly strong way to do that, but somewhere between having escrow accounts and having things like that to manage that, and then once somebody says I've got it and that and the money goes through or whatever. Yeah. So if there is risk in a society, then perhaps if the person hasn't got like lots of feedback from the crowd that this is an honest, good person and they will always deliver, then you might have to have other protection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of these runaway campaigns have also possibly, they're a good lesson for the future for rewards-based crowdfunding, that, you know, don't discount your products so much and then oversell, because you're going to, of course, put yourself into trouble. You know, selling an item at cost or you know, or below cost is definitely not a business model.
Exactly. Well, if in that example I gave about the Flow Hive one on Indiegogo with the beehive, when I used my story, team, and empathy traction, I pretty much gave it 10 out of 10 in each square, because, you know, I just really thought, wow. But that was when I didn't think of the aspect that they were originally only going to get $100,000 worth of beehives. And so, you know, the dad and his son could probably mate them with a few mates in Byron Bay and ship them away. You know, that would happen. But they actually sold 35,000 of them. So you can imagine you're sitting in a house in Byron Bay, you've had your campaign, you've sold 35,000 beehives all around the world. So therefore that one team there, I probably should have dropped that back to 8 or 7 when I knew it was 35, because they didn't have the production logistics, the experience to actually do that part of it. But, you know, I suppose when you've got $12 million sitting in the bank, you can pay for it. So what they did, they've got a production plant in California and one in Europe and one in Australia that just churn these things out every 18 seconds, flat packed, out they go. Now, that's an example whereby if it hadn't have been economical to produce 35,000 for some reason, whatever, then some of the campaigns have then had problems that they can't deliver everything that people have ordered. So in this case, it worked, but I think that's something to be aware of, that if it does scale tremendously, because sometimes you might have a unique little part in it, like a seashell or something like that, then, you know, to get 150 seashells might be real, but with 35,000, you think, shit, how am I going to get that many? So, yeah, so that's the way you have to look at it. Okay,
no, exactly. So the next question is asking me to sort of look into your crystal ball and say, 10 years out, what do you see for crowdfunding? Where do you see crowdfunding globally, and where is Africa going to be in the mix?
Yeah, well, you know, things will progress on. I think from a regulation point of view, the regulators will recognize that the crowd will catch a bad actor long before the regulator does. Yeah. Because what we've seen, there's hardly been any cases of fraud around the world, and there's now been millions of campaigns. But what happens is the money's held in escrow, and it has to sit there until the campaign's finished. And during that campaign, if there's something shonky about these people, they're not up to scratch, or somebody doesn't feel good about them, they communicate to the platform. They say, look, these guys aren't good. I don't think you should have that platform up there. So that offer up there. So I think what will happen is the regulators will realize that it's better for them to empower the platforms and the public to have a channel to report wrongdoing or something happening with a campaign, and they'll know about it before the money's gone. And I know in Australia, even when there's financial fraud here, by the time the regulator gets involved and tries to find the people and do something about it, the money's gone. Yeah. And I think that's what we'll find in crowdfunding, that it is actually, by using the crowd, it's probably going to be a better way of handling these things than at the moment, where often if somebody wants to rip you off under existing regulations, they probably have long gone, and so's the money by the time they get caught. Yeah. And I think that won't really happen in crowdfunding. So I say it's going to scale up. the regulations are going to match more this type of operation, and we're going to see it become an integral part of people's life. And the word crowdfunding will probably be disappeared completely, because it'll just be the normal way that you do business. Because really, even if you look at reward, it's pre-sales. People are paying for something in advance. It's not a new concept. And it just means that because of the internet, this is what's happening. So the word crowdfunding will have gone, and will just be that'll be the normal commercial way of doing business for that volume of transaction. Okay,
yeah, I mean that sort of does make sense. If we sort of move a little bit off crowdfunding, and there's just a few things that I thought I'd just find out from you, Paul. Can you share with the community here what internet resource you think is invaluable to your daily life? What do you use every day that people should know about and should use?
Yeah, well, I use Evernote. I use for just about everything I read on a particular subject. And if I'm going to do a blog post on something or research something, I can go back like 4 years now and really get that information. And it's a fantastic resource, and it searches text as well. Even, you know, OCR, I think it's got, which is really, really good. So I think that's a very, very valuable resource. And also in the future, I think that more and more, the way WordPress is going, it seems like there's going to be plugins and templates to do a lot of the things you need to do in terms of selling things online. And you'll see that there's already crowdfunding plugins, but I think rather than having bespoke type platforms, we're going to move more towards a platform that's got lots of APIs coming into it, and you can pretty much structure yourself.
Okay, yes, absolutely. I mean, building things yourself is becoming easier and easier. And in terms of, I'm pretty sure you're someone who reads quite a lot. What book one book that you've read in your life that really has impacted you and people should know about?
I think The Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki. He used to work for Apple, but he's got a pitch deck in there. It's all about the startup, the things you should consider, and that's a great book, The Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki. And I've used that format for pictures and things like that, and the learnings and that so many times, because he only believes in 10 slides, and because he was an Apple, has to be this certain size font and no more than so many words on a page, and you know, it worked for Steve Jobs. You know, his presentations were absolutely brilliant, and so Guy just took the best of what he learned when he was at Apple and afterwards, and wrote a brilliant book.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, and I've followed Guy Kawasaki for a couple of years now and completely agree with what you're saying. So, Paul, what at the moment are you working on? What would you like to share? Is there anything new that you're doing at the moment that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, well, I've got a number of things. At the moment, I'm assisting a company that, funnily enough, is from South Africa on compliance around the world. And it's great to see a South African company coming out and really showing the rest of the world what they can do on a very, a well-run platform in terms of making sure they get all their compliance and things as they head out into the world. In terms of other things, occasionally you'll have, somebody that used to know me will come along and say, well, look, we're going to do a raise. What do you think of this and that type of thing? So I'm always involved, really insisting people getting the story and the team and the empathy traction right, and as a sounding board. And in doing so, there's the occasional conference you speak at or run a workshop or something like that. So it's really still being involved in that part of it. Some of it voluntary and some of it where you're actually engaged, like the case with Wealth Migrate. Okay,
no, great. And if people wanted to get hold of you or read what you're doing or follow you, how will they do that? How can people follow you and get hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is just to go to my website, paulniederer.com, or send me an email at paulniederer at me.com.
Okay.
I used to be very good at that blog posters. I used to do them like every week or every 2 weeks, but some months can go by now. But then I'm not sort of directly involved as much in actually running the platform. So it's only when I see something out in the world that I think, wow, that's interesting, I'd like to comment on that I do that. I'm pretty active in Quora in terms of if people are asking questions about crowdfunding, I like to contribute.
Okay.
But so really, yes, it's not difficult to find me by Googling anyway. There's so many videos and pages and things like that from, over the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is true. Just type in Paul Niederer into Google and there you are. So you're right. It is pretty simple. So Paul, I mean, that's the last thing I wanted to ask. And is there anything that you'd like to end off with today in terms of crowdfunding or anything of the sort?
I just think that there's a huge opportunity people to move from employment to their own business, but you can sort of what you call suck it and see by crowdfunding, especially in the reward side. If you have something that you think is great, it probably has to be a consumer product, but you can just plan it all out, and if a few friends think that wow, that sounds really good, I like that, and then you get around you a couple of people that help you to do it, like the Jobs and the Wozniak or whatever, and then you stimulate or get the empathy of a group of people, then you can take a product that you were just thinking about and test it and see how it goes. And if it doesn't work, you can have another go, but eventually you'll find something that and the good thing about with somewhere like Indiegogo, it can be all around the world. You can get customers, and how long, never in my life was the ability for somebody in a small village in the middle of the country able to sell products all the way around the world. It's a fantastic opportunity. So yes, I think that people should just embrace it. But make sure they go through the steps of knowing where their customers are coming from, that sort of thing. And there's plenty on you just Google how to run a crowdfunding campaign and you'll get so many ideas. But they basically go through the fact of gathering information, having tests, asking people all this time, getting some commitments, finding the right platform, getting it up on the platform, marketing to all your friends first, then out to others, getting PR. There's a set of sequences, but it works. It's worked now for millions of campaigns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. People don't really have an excuse these days if you're willing to put in the planning and the work. You most definitely can have a successful raise.
Yes.
So anyway, Paul, thank you so much for taking time out. It's a Friday afternoon, in fact, while we're recording this. So, thanks so much for taking your time out to chat to us and to give, the wealth of knowledge that you have in your head. I think we could sit here and talk about it for hours, but we'll cut it now. And I just wanted to say, thank you and good luck with everything that you are doing. And I know we'll be in contact again. So thanks very much and have a great weekend.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. And, if you feel free like doing another one where you might have 10 people that are thinking about raising it and they want to bounce off or anything, we can always work something out because you've got a great association here. I see you've been invited over to London and different things. So, people want to be involved in this and I don't mind contributing as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Paul. It really has been a pleasure chatting to you. And as I said, have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Cheers, Paul.
Yes.
If you are as excited about crowdfunding as we are, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below.